Welcome to another edition of Crime Time with DutyRon and Ed Wallace. We are two retired New York City police detectives. And if you like all things true crime related from the police detective's perspective, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you'll get all things DutyRon. And this guy over here, he's somewhere, I'm poking him, Ed Wallace, there he is. When we upload another video or go live. Tonight, we're going to be talking again. We were live last night. We had our auto crime experts. We're going to be talking with a computer crimes expert. He's a retired commanding officer from the NYPD Computer Crime Squad. He served 24 years, and he was, when he retired, the commanding officer of the elite Computer Crime Squad. They do a fantastic job on all of our homicide cases and everything in between. But before we bring him on, I want to just find out how Ed Wallace is and where the hell is he? What Ed? Yeah, I know you're out of state, but how's everything going, Army training wise?
Yeah, it's going good. Army trainings are I'm in New Jersey, by Waretown, New Jersey, and I'm doing a Homeland Security training here for the folks in Ocean County, New Jersey.
Your schedule is exhausting to me, and I work full-time myself, but the travel that you do, you've been to Iraq, you've been to Africa, who knows where else you've been, but you know, Ed, you get the job done. You're a trooper, you're a warrior, and everybody here loves and appreciates the time that you put into this, including myself. So I want to say thank you to you, Ed, for taking time out. You know, I know you could be, you know, maybe video chatting with your wife, getting your honeydew checklist up to date, but we appreciate you coming on and going live with us on these sensitive issues and on these cases. So tonight we're going to be talking about everything laptop tech related to Kiely Rodni. There's so many questions. But before we get into it, I want to say thank you to our Patreon supporters, the channel members, and everyone who engages in this community. The subscribers and the comments that you guys leave are second to none. You guys are really true internet detectives, and we appreciate you guys engaging with us and challenging us. So it's always great to see each and every one of you here engaging with us in the live chat and after. You know, the great part about the comment section, and Ed, I know you'll agree on this. Once the live is over, it's a way to continue the conversation. So It's always great to see you guys in the comment section. So keep up that. Make sure you hit that thumbs up while we're here. And let's get right into this thing. Ed.
Did you forget the Patreon supporters?
I did not. You weren't paying attention.
No, because you normally say, I'd like to give thanks and praise to the Patreon supporters.
I do, and I did say it in the beginning.
Every time you say that, I keep thinking of Bob Marley.
Yeah.
Let's give thanks and praise to the Lord. Yeah.
All right. Let's get into it. I have a small clip. This is from the state of Maine, the police, their computer crimes unit. And the reason I'm going to play this for you all is because our guest, that when we come back from this little 2-minute piece here, our guest is the commanding officer of the NYPD retired computer crime squad. And as I was telling you guys this afternoon, in 1991, we had 2,200 homicides in the city of New York. That was my rookie year. And you know, Ed, you know, he's a hairbag, so he was, you know, he was already a seasoned veteran when I came on in 91. At that point, he was already, you know, into it, and I'm sure Dennis too. But the bottom line is that these folks had a lot of work to do in computer crimes because they enhanced a lot of our homicide cases. Example, taking computers out of people's homes that were victims of these heinous crimes and trying to figure out if somebody like their significant other planned this thing out in Google searches and so forth. So we're going to get into this all, but let me play this little clip, and then this is just going to be an introduction into what our next guest is going to be talking to us about. So let's let this fly.
Child exploitation investigators say they are working harder than ever before here in Maine and around the country. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children fielded more than 29 million tips last year. The Maine State Police Computer Crimes Lab is constantly getting reports from the National Center and has received more than 600 so far this year.
News Center Maine's David Guilford got an inside look at this unit, which has been put into the spotlight this spring.
The team here at CCU is exposed to on a daily basis. I really don't have the words to describe that.
In a brick fortress in Vassalboro, Sergeant Tom Pickering with Maine State Police heads the 19-person computer crimes unit. Half are civilians, like these two women whose identities we've hidden.
Right here, they're reviewing cyber tips and conducting those initial review and investigations.
They use supercomputers to process data, toolkits to break open laptops and hard drives, and what's called a Faraday box, which blocks signals to devices placed inside, so a suspect can't remotely delete data from their confiscated phone. The tools are sci-fi, the work excruciating.
These are images and videos of children being assaulted, so that's extremely difficult.
They're busier than ever. After fielding more than 1,200 reports last year, they've already received 600 by the first week of April.
This spike in call volume is unprecedented.
Where in the world is this child being harmed?
Last month, we spoke with Yoda Soros from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children.
And our goal there is to make sure that we can then push that report and make it available to law enforcement.
The National Center constantly brings reports to Maine State Police. The two organizations helped produce the Elliot Cutler arrest in March. But when their work leads to an arrest or conviction, Pickering's team doesn't rest.
We're constantly moving on to the next one.
No time to celebrate a victory.
No, everyone here is pretty humble. It's not something that we celebrate.
The work never stops inside their fortress. David Guilford, News Center, Maine.
So there's a little taste of what these great men and women do from the computer crimes task force and squads across the country, across our great nation, and across the world. Ed, I'm going to let you introduce our guest, unless you don't have the data. If you don't, I think you do, because you do your homework.
Well, what? He's the former CEO of our computer crimes section at a 1PP. For those who don't know what that is, that's One Police Plaza, and
AKA the Puzzle Plaza.
Yeah, and so just like his counterparts in Maine, he also worked with the missing and exploited children people, and worked very closely with them, and has done some great work for protecting our children from internet predators. So let's bring him on.
Dennis, thank you so much for taking out the time from your busy schedule to join us. Dennis Lane, we appreciate you.
Thanks, Ron. Thanks, Ed. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. And just say, it kind of brings me back seeing that video, because as Ed said, I founded the New York City Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, which was funded through the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So we would receive those cyber tips and act on them. So basically we had a secure VPN, or virtual private network, with the FBI, and they would send us tips. So basically the National Center would act as a clearinghouse. So say someone saw something online, child pornography, or an internet service provider, or a website administrator saw someone post it, they would forward it to the FBI as they're required by law to do. And then they would do some preliminary checks and find out what area of the country the offender was in, and then send it to us. And then we would act on that. And so basically how our squad worked is we had, when it was fully staffed, we'd have like 22 detectives, 2 sergeants, and 1 lieutenant, who was me. And we divided it into a regular working detective squad, just like you see on TV, like with Sipowicz, we would catch cases that would be referred, through the FBI or other sources, or we develop our own. Then we had a forensic laboratory in the back at One Police Plaza, and we had some very high-tech equipment, and we would analyze seized equipment, as Ron was saying. Say we had a homicide, and we seized a laptop, was the victim's laptop, or maybe the offender dropped a cell phone. We would work on those in the forensic environment and analyze and extract the data and the evidence. A lot of times offenders will delete images or data to try to thwart our investigation, but we would find it anyway. And then after that was done, we'd present that to the district attorney's office, and then my detectives would testify in court. We had about a 98% conviction rate in the cases that we developed because my detectives are the best in the world, and they followed up on every tip. Relentlessly worked these cases, and we put a lot of bad people behind bars, and I'm very proud of their work. It was my honor to work with them.
Wow. Hey, boss, I got to stop you right there, because did you say 98% success rate? This is the New York City Police Department. We are talking, and those numbers that I threw out there, ladies and gentlemen, in 1991, 2,200 homicides in the city of New York, and it slowly decreased as the years went forward. But we did the next year, it was 1975. In 1993, it went down to like 1,500, and it slowly dropped to very low numbers. But in that day and age, we had an astronomical amount of murders happening in the city of New York, and the men and women in computer crimes supplemented a major case homicide, and they did unbelievable work. But Lieutenant, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you, for our listening audience, what is, and it says you were the executive and commanding officer of the computer crime squad, but also it says that you were in charge of the digital forensics lab. Can you explain to our audience what the digital forensics lab is and what it did?
Sure. So basically, that was the thing I was referring to. We call it the forensics laboratory. So first off, the key to our success is, like you saw in that video, in Maine, they use civilians. We were not allowed to use civilians. So all of our investigators were NYPD detectives. So first off, we drew from a very disparate group of detectives. We had former homicide investigators. We had people from narcotics, auto crime, public morals, and vice. So all different backgrounds. And first and foremost, they were excellent detectives. So they knew how to build a case, and they made their bones in the field. But they also had to have, technological acumen. They had to understand the technology. And when I started there in 2004, cell phones, mobile phones, the internet on phones was very slow and shaky. It wasn't what it is now. Our unit was started in the mid 1990s. It was one of the first in the country. But so we had these people with incredible investigative prowess, and then combined with the internet skills that we taught them. So we would send them to schools through the FBI and other groups, and they would learn to do digital forensics. What does that mean? Well, for instance, we take a laptop, and we think there might be evidence on that laptop. What we do is we bring it into our environment, and the chain of custody is always important. We voucher it in. The detective may bring it from whatever precinct the homicide occurred, if it was a homicide. Then we wouldn't just start working on it. We'd make a digital copy, a byte by byte copy of that hard drive. Then we put the original aside and only work on the copy. So when cases went to trial, the defense has the option of saying, hey, we want to bring in our forensic expert to check your work. So we would always maintain that original copy, and we had a way to prove that we had never added or subtracted any data from that. So basically, there's an algorithm that's accepted in court that shows that, hey, this is an exact digital copy of the original. Then we would go to work on that copy. And basically how it works is, when someone deletes a file on a computer, say it's a picture of a child being assaulted, they think it's gone forever. And in some cases, that can be accomplished. But in most cases, what happens is the operating system merely counts that as empty space. And until it's overwritten by new data, it's still there. And we used cutting edge technology that was very expensive, that the police department paid for, and they're combined with their skill, and they were able to extract that information, and we could see the exact date and time it was deposited on the laptop, and importantly, the exact date and time it was deleted. And that shows intent. It shows intent to, number one, have the image, and number two, to try to get rid of it because they knew it was evidence. And then we would present that in court. So that's kind of the heart of digital forensics, is finding hidden data, or say we're doing a digital surveillance system. There's nothing deleted there, but we want to document what happened and how we can present in court. Same thing, GPS units, there's anything electronic we would work on.
Yeah. So when you say you copied the hard drive, it's also known as cloning, correct?
Yeah, we would use a device called an image master. So
Right.
it's an industry standard. It hooks up to the we remove the hard drive from the device, and then we copy it bit by bit. And that's the key. We don't just copy the files. Like say you wanted to copy a thumb drive, you would just go into Windows and copy it. We're copying the empty space also, because that's where the hidden data is.
Mm-hmm. See, now when I was in the field in crime scene, we had to have a specialized training on how to recover the computer electronic equipment, document every connection, cables, what went where, so that it could all be put back together once we package it up and sent it to people like you, so that they can look at our photographs and see, okay, and then we label the cables. Okay, cable A goes into this port, cable A port there, and so forth and so on. So you can put all the hardware and peripheral connections back together to into this original state. You got to be very careful of how you deal with these things. A lot of things can damage them, like if it's still running, leave it running, and all kinds of things like that. You don't want to mess around with any of the starts or shutting down or anything like that, because then you can be changing things on the drive and so forth. I have a lot of respect for what you guys would do and the information you're able to glean. Now, if I remember correctly, were you guys on the 11th floor or the 8th floor?
We were on the 11th. We
Yeah,
originally down below, and then we got a grant from the mayor's office for $1 million, and we developed back in the day, it was a big deal. It was a completely digital storage unit. So instead of copying the hard drives, it was all in a server. So my guys actually put together the server and wired it by hand. And that's the other thing, is this evidence is contraband. These images of children especially, we can't just let that go out on the server in the police department. This has to be in a cage in a place that we control it, not only for evidence purposes, but we don't want to get it now.
You know what? I was in that office, and I got to witness some of the spots and some of the things and how you guys were set up. And what I found interesting about it is there was some areas where you couldn't even go. Like if you were an outsider, I was just coming to interview, and when I came up there was like certain sections, like especially in the back where you had the dark room, they called it, or what, I forgot the exact name of it, but it was where all your detectives were scouring the internet and looking for these child predators and so forth on the internet in all these rooms and stuff like that. So it's fascinating work, but I want to pull this in and circle it all back to Kiely Rodni, and that's what we're talking about here. Right. A 2013 Honda CRV goes into the water. It was in the water for arguably about 2 weeks. We don't know the exact date it went in there. We don't know the exact amount of time that this laptop was in the water, if it was thrown in after the fact. We don't have knowledge of all of this stuff, but we do know this: it's not right now, as it stands, a criminal investigation. But there is a cell phone, which is an iPhone cell phone, that's outstanding. It's not been recovered, and a iMac Pro recovered. I have a photo of it, and I have kind of a shoddy video that I'll show you, boss. But I just wanted to, before I show that video, ask you, and Ed and I are, we've been going back and forth with this. In a situation where it's, underwater for arguably 2 weeks, the laptop, what are the chances of retrieving data? And I know that there's no definitive answer to this, but it is in a lake, no salt to that water. It's a body of water, 65, 70 degrees ish, and retrieved by a civilian. What are we looking at here, boss?
Well, you'd be surprised. You bring up a key point. Salt water is much more corrosive for electronics. And you might think that once it's in water, we can't recover it. Important to understand two things. First, we have mechanical hard drives and we have solid state hard drives. Back when I started doing this work, we only had mechanical. So basically, You can hear it when your computer's running. There are metal platters where the data is deposited. Excuse me. Almost looks like a record player for those of us who are old enough to remember those. And they spin around with a little motor, and they can be easily damaged. But the newer, most new laptops have solid state hard drives or SSDs. So there are no moving parts. All the data is stored sort of like a thumb drive. It's on a circuit board on a memory chip. In cases like this, the first thing you may think is, well, we want to dry out that hard drive. Well, that's not what you want to do. You want to keep it wet, because once you dry it out, things will start to rust. The connections will start to rust on the circuit board. They'll oxidize is the actual word. So we would keep it in, this is fortuitous that it's fresh water. So we keep it in a fresh water environment until we're ready to do our forensics. And, we're transported from the scene in a tub of water. We'll keep it in the lab in a tub of water until such time we're ready to go. And then we'll carefully dry it out. And there are many times when data can be extracted in such cases.
Outstanding. And let me correct myself, because again, I misspoke. It's not an iMac. It's a MacBook Pro. I'm not an Apple guy. Give me a good Windows laptop. Give me a good Android cell phone. I don't like the iPhone crap. Is there any difference, boss, when you work with Windows versus the Apple stuff?
Totally different. Windows is based on, we used to call it the NTFS, New Technology File System, whereas Mac-based products are based on Unix, which is a variant almost of Linux. Totally different operating system, much more stable, and there's a totally different technology you use, and different different electronic devices you would use, and different ways of doing it. And there are, obviously there are private companies that make software that help us to do our work. And there are some, and I can't name some of the names, but that specialize in Apple or iOS products. You have iMacs, which is like a freestanding desktop, MacBook Pros, which is a laptop, iPads, iPhones. They all share similar attributes in some way how the operating system works. So you want to approach it in a different way. Windows saves files in a different way than Mac does.
Is it more difficult for retrieval on a Mac as opposed to Windows device?
Not necessarily. It's just, it's like Ed was saying, it's the way it's packaged up and delivered to us. If we don't get it in pristine condition or as good condition as we can, the chances are less than average we'll recover things. So there is different technology for using Apple products and for Windows, but it comes down to the skill of the investigator, the technological prowess, the ability of the software to extract data. So a lot of variables.
Yeah, you want to protect the device from static electricity charges and things, magnets, things of that nature. Sure. You spoke about Faraday bags in that that particular news clip, so that you can keep outside people from trying to gain access to the device remotely, and then changing settings and all that stuff.
Yeah, sure. There are many times, we didn't have Faraday bags back in the day. We would just wrap it in Reynolds wrap.
Yeah.
Aluminum foil.
Hey, it works on an easy pass.
The idea is, what you don't want is that, most people are familiar with, you say you have your iPhone, I lost my iPhone. I can delete it remotely. Well, that requires a signal to come through the internet. So first off, the device has to either be on cellular data or on Wi-Fi. So by wrapping it in the Reynolds wrap, where we don't want to shut it down, as Ed mentioned. If it's running, we want it to continue running, because we've had suspects actually booby trap their devices.
Absolutely.
So that they would go, when they would shut it down, they'd hit Control F whatever, because these are computer people. Whereas if you would go start shut down, it would delete data. So we'd run into that. So we would keep it running, even to the case where we were doing a search warrant on an offender's house in a child pornography case. We would have a detective in the back seat of the car as we're going back to our lab, moving the mouse around on a trackpad so it wouldn't go into sleep mode.
Sleep mode, right. And then lock you out.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. And then what about battery backups? We plug them into battery backups so that it doesn't lose electricity, especially on laptops. And we had also some other issues with the electronics that you have to be concerned about. Besides the ones that we just talked about, one of them I came into my head and just left. I'm sorry, a senior moment.
I got a question. I got a question that's in my head in a senior moment, and then I'll let Ed continue to take over. This goes to you, boss. These type of recoveries. Now we're talking about an older, the MacBook Pro, 2013, 2014. They were thicker. They were heavier than the devices of current day. When these things get recovered, like we talked about, this guy took it out of the water. I'm about to show this video where he takes it out of the water, puts it onto the shore, and then puts it in a duffel bag, and then it stays in his car for an extended period of time, and he shows it to somebody, and you can see water still dripping out of it. Is it true, and I'm only asking this because I get these questions on my website, is it true that these type of recoveries, the data recovery is also a science and also electronics, but isn't it true that perhaps the folks who are working on it, if they don't know what they're doing, or if they're not experienced, could they lose some of this data if you're not heavily experienced in this type of recovery process?
Sure, and that's why our detectives, we follow industry standard practices. Just like you showed the video of the Maine State Police, when I was we had the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. It was one of 61 regional task force. So we would meet several times a year. This is funded by the federal government, and we'd meet to compare notes about how to do cases. And we were always in school. My detectives were much better at this than I, but I would take the same courses, and I have some of the certifications they had. But basically, we would be certified. Say we were using a software product that's an industry standard for Windows. We would go through extensive training, and then we would be certified by the manufacturer that we were experts in the use of this technology, so that we could testify in court and know what we were doing. And then after a while, they would be admitted as expert witnesses because they had testified so many times. Same thing with Mac products. So whatever hardware and software we used, we would be trained and certified. So we would never do anything unless we knew exactly how to do it and we had experience with it.
Yes. And that goes on throughout your career, because different software is developed, different techniques are always being developed to gather more information out of these electronic devices. The thing that popped in my head and flew out, believe it or not, was airplane mode, and how we sometimes use that to protect remote access to devices and so forth. But anyhow,
yeah, we just don't want to. Like you said, like if it's running, we don't want to disturb it. Right. We want to be able to testify that this is the native state that this device was in. So by putting it in airplane mode, it's a stopgap way of doing it. But we'd rather wrap it in Reynolds wrap to protect it that way. Once we get it into our environment, then we're safe.
Yep. All right, let me show this Check It TV's. This is one of his shorts, because the actual video that I shared with you, Ed, I think he removed it. Let's just keep the comments on this topic, not any comments about Check It TV or about anything that has gone on with him. But this is rough video. It's not going to be full screen, but I want you to take a peek at it, boss. I'll make it full screen so you could see it better. But this is the best that I could do. I'm just sharing it. So he's on a kayak holding his phone, and that's the device that he found on the floor, on the floor bed of this lake. And he brings it back to the to the shoreline, and then puts it on the shore. It's not going to show it on this little short video, and then he puts it in a duffel bag. Okay. What can you make of that?
In terms of how that would affect the analysis?
The analysis, and also, here's a civilian recovering this item and then handing it off someday, a day or so later, or that same day, to law enforcement.
So first off, it's great that, and I saw, Adventures with Purpose, who, retrieved the vehicle, and thank God these people are doing great work. But when it comes to evidence, I'd prefer, if evidence is found, notify the authorities and let them recover it. because what happens is you have a chain of custody issue.
Mhm.
It's great that he documented it with his phone video of him recovering it, but he had it for several days. Now, a crafty defense attorney, if this goes to trial, will say, well, how do I know that this man didn't put images or data on this laptop?
I think it was the same day, Dennis. We got maybe I might have presented that wrong. I think he called. He waited 2 or 3, 4 hours, according to him, and then he called the family, and her grandfather showed up, and they must have called or whatever. And he had a video of it. The grandfather comes up. He shows it to the grandfather's significant other. She takes a video, takes a picture of it. He takes it out of the duffel bag from the back of his car. And then a deputy comes down and he's holding it. And he goes to hand it to the grandfather. And the grandfather says to the deputy, hey, can I hold this? And the deputy goes, oh, okay. And he takes it and holds it by the edges. And then the deputy was like, oh, I'm going to go get a bag from my car. And he goes to the car. We don't see him take this thing and put it in the bag, but they take custody of it there. And I think this was all in the same day. So there wasn't that, but there's still a chain of custody issue here.
Yeah,
Sure.
definitely. You know, because initially when he called 911, they said they weren't coming. They weren't interested in this.
Yeah.
Okay. And that was, law enforcement's response. But, so now they have this. Now, I understand this particular laptop has a solid state drive. Okay. And so why don't you walk the audience through if this came into your possession and you were asked to look at it, what you would do?
Well, like I say, the first thing, it's wet. I'd want to have it immersed in the same media that it was in when it was found. Preferably the same water from the lake. Scoop up some water from the lake in a container and keep it in that, like I say, so it doesn't start to rust, because the rust inhibits electronics and it can create all kinds of problems. Just to say that the chain of custody issues aren't fatal, but it definitely complicates things, because just as you mentioned, say a detective, recovers a laptop at a homicide scene. Well, we want that detective to be the one who vouchers it and brings it to our lab. And once we get into our lab, we're going to scan it in, and now it's locked in our evidence locker where no one can get to it. When it comes to doing the forensics on this, we'd have everything set. Obviously, we want to photograph it. Those stickers are distinctive, and a lot of young people do that now. They have some type of stickers on it, and that's important. That someone may have been at a party and had seen her with this laptop. Oh, well, that's her laptop. She had that alien sticker. She had some other sticker. That's helpful. When we get into the forensics laboratory and ready to go, we'd remove the hard drive physically from the device, and then we'd start to dry it. And I can't get into the exact way that that's done, because that is sort of a trick of the trade, but it would be dried out, and then we would use special connectors to, connect that to our image master or whatever we're using these days to copy that data out. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. With solid state drives, you're in better shape than a mechanical one, but still it's an iffy proposition. So then we copy that data out, we do our algorithm to show that it matches exactly, and then we safeguard that physical device in a secure way that's not going to degrade, and then we'll work on the actual digital copy, and that's where the real work begins. We're going to look in the empty space on the drive for anything that's deleted. It used to be back in 2004 when I started, text messages were something new. So that's the other issue of it, is what data can be had on the servers of the internet provider. So back then, text messages would last like a day, maybe 2 days. So if you didn't act quickly, they were gone. Nowadays, they're kept longer and all that. So we're going to extract the data. We're going to look at it. We're going to look at different file types, documents, videos, images, and then, like Ron mentioned, internet searches are key. There was a case years ago down in Chesapeake Bay area of a woman who, pretty painful, but she murdered her husband, basically. And when they found her laptop, they found that she had done searches for undetectable poisons, how to dispose of a body, Chesapeake Bay tidal currents, and the body was found in multiple suitcases along the shore, had washed up. This is very important evidence, sometimes even more important than deleted files, to show intent,
Yes.
Because this woman was saying she didn't know anything about it, but here she's the only person who had access to the laptop, and she was doing these searches.
Yeah,
So,
many high-profile cases like that, like Casey Anthony trying to, search how to knock out her child so she can go out and party and all this stuff. Yeah, a lot of people have been caught doing stuff like this. So now, what are the odds now, with this being wet, that you'll be able to successfully get this cloned and get into that drive and get
like
down?
I say, it's definitely not impossible. It's been done. It's a matter of how long it's been immersed, because even the oxidation occurs when air gets on it. But things do rust underwater because there's oxygen in the water. So it's a matter of, like, if it was a day or two, obviously much better than a week or two. But I would never discount any possibility. It all depends on the skill of the investigator, and there are obviously physical limitations. If something is rusted and it won't connect, the drive can't be woken up, then it's gone. But
so LT, if your guys responded to this thing, they would want to take that device and put it in the same water and transport it back to the lab.
Ideally, yes.
Right, and we know that wasn't done here.
And it's pretty similar to the way they recover black boxes underwater.
Right.
They leave it in the water until they can get it back into the lab.
For the same reasons.
Yes.
Because most black boxes now are digital. Yes.
Now, without the phone being recovered, let's just say, for argument's sake, because everybody that's watching here is concerned about this. Let's say, for argument's sake, we never find Kiely Rodni's phone. Someone took it, put it in a garbage bag, disposed of it in regular garbage or something of that nature. What are the odds that, a 16-year-old, everybody's tech savvy nowadays, she seemed to be pretty up on tech, syncing onto the cloud? How difficult is that? I know we got to go through subpoenas and so forth and things like that. How difficult is that for somebody that's tech savvy on the law enforcement side to maybe sync up and see her last moments of texting? These are important things. Was she in a panic? Was she sending texts, or was she searching for how to get help? Is that a possibility if that was a device that was all synced up on a family cloud or something like that?
Sure. I mean, things have changed a lot since I started doing this. Back then, with a thing with mobile devices, I think it was called Microsoft Active Sync, and it was very primitive. Nowadays, I'm a Mac guy, so my phone is synced to the cloud. My Mac is synced to the cloud. I have programs that reside on both devices that sync each other over the air. They're, like, say you're texting someone, right? And you'll say you have an iPhone. You'll notice that sometimes the text is blue, there's a blue bubbles, and sometimes it's green. So green means it's a traditional SMS, or a simple mail service, I think we call it. That's just a regular text message. The blue is using Apple's network. So it's an Apple-to-Apple device, and it goes to a different protocol. But in either way, if it's going through the servers of the company, it's kept. Their data is kept. Back in the day, I remember when I was a police officer on patrol, I would respond to cases in an office where someone would break into a desktop computer to steal the RAM, the random access memory, because it was so expensive. Now, and hard drives, for a long time, it was like $1 a megabyte, or that's how you'd figure the cost. Now, you can get a thumb drive for whatever, $10 that has hundreds of gigabytes on. So now, same thing with internet service providers or hosting companies. Their server space is much cheaper, so they'll keep it longer. And in most cases, they'll keep it at least 30 days. And they just do it as a course of business. And what happens then is law enforcement would first we want to send a letter of preservation. And what that means is it'll take a few days to get a search warrant or a subpoena signed by a judge or a district attorney. What we don't want is us to be the unlucky person we're on a 29th day of the cycle, and it's about to expire on the server. So we'll dash off a letter, and that would be electronic, and we'll send it to, say, Apple or whoever, and say, hey, we need this data. We're going to get legal process, legal paperwork to get this. But until that happens, we're commanding you to hold on to that data. Do not let it be erased. And that stops the clock. Then we'll go to a judge. If you want to see content, meaning emails or content of text, that requires a search warrant signed by a judge. Other data can be gotten through an administrative subpoena signed by a district attorney's representative and things like that, connection logs, IP addresses, and that can tie a person to a crime scene too. So that's a very important thing to note, and you want to do that. You want to get those records, because even if the physical device is unreachable or can't be found, that data may reside on a server somewhere.
Hey, boss, what do you know about cell tower pings? Do you guys in computer crimes get involved in any of that stuff, or is that something in the Taru kind of aspect? Do you guys know about that technology? We know that phones are constantly sending out signals if they're powered up, but once they go and they're off, shut down, do they still send signals to cell towers, cell phones? Like, let's say if someone took it, threw it in the woods, and they're like, oh, no one's ever going to find this out here, let's get rid of it.
That's one of the few things, Ron, that I can't discuss, and there's a reason. Years ago, a newspaper in New York ran an article about this and gave away some of our secrets.
Trade secrets, yeah.
Yes. And what happened is criminals read this article and modified their behavior. And they started doing things with their devices because they knew about pinging of cell towers. So that's the kind of thing I just can't, and I'm sorry, I can't discuss, because I don't want to give ammunition to someone to circumvent.
You know what, boss? I respect that, and I appreciate that. I asked that question knowing that you probably weren't going to answer it, but I did it for our audience and for the people who, those are pressing questions. The good news is that the long arm of the law, more times than not, is one step ahead of the criminals, and we're always learning by trial and error when it comes to investigations and technology. So I think you can agree with me on that, boss, that, you know, we are always trying to get ahead of the game, and that's catching the bad guys. So
and that's, yeah, and Ron, that's one of the prime reasons. Like, remember I said that my detectives came from different squads and different backgrounds. You can teach someone to do forensics. You can't teach them how to be a detective. That's learned out in the field by going to crime scenes, by interviewing criminals. And that's where the New York City police detectives are the greatest in the world, because they bring that mentality to cases. And now I work in private industry now, and I bring my experience to bear in cases, because I know how criminals think, because I've had enough experience with them. My detectives, maybe someone worked in Vice, so they have an inside angle into how those operations work. So they're always thinking that way. They know how criminals think. They know what they know. And I'll tell you, you know, a lot of criminals are very highly intelligent people who would do very well in business if that's the way they wanted to go.
Yeah.
They're very observant. They observe human nature. Ron, I'm sure, and Ed, you remember on the street, we call it telescoping, where criminals are always looking around to see where the cops are.
Right.
Because they know what's happening. So we have to be one step ahead of them.
Yeah, and you said it perfectly, boss, because there's so many people who think, oh, I can go to a 6-month or 8-month law enforcement academy, and then I'm a super detective. No, you got to earn that. You got to work the streets. You got to burn some shoe leather. You got to shake hands with doorknobs. You got to get those people skills and understand how to interview people and read them. And the only way you get that is by practice. You don't get it out of a book.
Yeah.
That's right. It's passed on from one detective to another too. You know, some detective in the 1800s figured something out and passed it on and on and on. There's some guy now who uses that data.
Boss, I want to go to the chat here, because we have a live audience here. There's over 1,000 people watching this live interactive event that we're doing here tonight. I want to say thank you to Pauline Buckles, Dawn Marie for being a great moderator, Diane B, who happens to be my neighbor. She lives across the street from me. She's not only a good friend, but she's here doing moderation for us. And thank you to Joey Brooklyn and Lieutenant Pete Pranzo, street crime retired lieutenant from the NYPD. He's got a book, Harlem Raiders, out there. Lieutenant Pete, there he is, and his wife, Richella, big supporters of Crime Time with DutyRon. Karen, Legal Minded Friends. She's a attorney from the United Kingdom. She's always on and supporting this great community. I want to just give a big shout out to the super chatters. Trevor Lee from East Tennessee. He just came on before. He sent us a super chat and had some kind words, and they just keep flowing in. Rocky is here. Tweety, U.S. News, has so much information. She's always challenging us and sending us great insight and data. Maui Swift from over in Hawaii, thank you for joining. Aloha, Maui Swift. It's just it's unbelievable because this chat goes so quickly. But I need to always take a moment here to give thanks and praise to all of the folks who are here hanging in with us and sending out great messages. This info, again, this is a learning channel. We try to bring you all things true crime related from a police detective's perspective. And we bring bosses and administrators and executives from the NYPD. We had the commanding officer of the Harbor Unit. He was a great guest about 2 weeks ago. Paul, what a chock full of information when it comes to his divers and the scuba unit, NYPD and the FDNY. They work so unbelievably close together in the waterways that surround Manhattan and the 5 boroughs. These guys out there doing God's work, and he had nothing but praise for Adventures with Purpose, just as this great commander here, retired Lieutenant Dennis Lane from the NYPD Computer Crimes Squad. Hey, I want to just show, and Ed's going to shake his head because he's going to be like, oh, not again. I want to show the dive. I know, Dennis, I know you looked at it. Ed gets upset with this, but I want to show this because it shows them pulling this car out of the water. And it also shows some electronics down below, charging brick. And some people highlighted this thing and said that they saw that laptop. I personally didn't see it. Ed, did you see it?
I personally didn't see it either. I saw the Apple charging brick.
Yeah.
So that's I'm not a Steve Jobs Kool-Aid drinker, so I never bought into the crapples.
Yeah, but guess what? Our esteemed guest had just said to us he is an Apple guy. So Ed,
listen, my son is a software engineer. He's got all kinds of Apple stuff.
Yeah. Let me just do this for you, Ed.
Bueller.
Yes, Bueller.
All right.
Bueller.
All right. Well, I can press the button twice. All right. Let's play this, and then we'll wrap it up. We're gonna take boss. Do you have 10 minutes to do a Q&A live with the audience?
Sure.
All right. So we'll take your questions after this. So everybody, hang around. This is Adventures with Purpose, going down and doing the dive again. Nick Wren. I can't get enough of seeing what the great work that this guy has done. So let's let it play. It's only 2.5 minutes. Ed, don't fall asleep on us. All right.
Confirm. I see the vehicle and the license plate. We have just found Kiely's vehicle. Over.
10-4. Do a full assessment methodically, slowly. Make sure you focus on footage of the vehicle so that we can accurately relay that to the authorities.
All right, quickly, I want to just pull the audience. How many people here, by a show of hands, actually legitimately in this video, not the enhanced one, saw a laptop inside this vehicle? Just put it in the chat. Let me know if you've seen it. If you didn't see it, say that you didn't. Just a yes or a no.
The vehicle is upside down. I repeat, it is upside down. I'm at the rear of the vehicle now, working my way around towards the driver's side. Over.
10-4. I read you loud and clear.
I'm approaching the driver's side window. not positively identified anybody inside yet. I'm looking in the back now.
10-4. Take your time. Be safe.
I see a pair of shoes in the back. I'm moving my way towards the back window.
10-4. I read you loud and clear.
I just confirmed there are human remains in the vehicle. Over.
10-4.
So I'm going to just stop it there. I see a candy bar. It says Truly up on the top right where my mouse is. This looks like some type of pen right here. I see a charging brick. Dennis, correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct.
And this looks like a visor, because remember, this vehicle is upside down. This is the roof. This is the roof liner of this vehicle. This looks like a visor or something, because it's got the little connection right here. Ed, what do you think?
It could be. It's bent. It could be a visor. That dislodged from above the windshield.
I'm going to just put it back just a little bit. That's the best view that I have right there, and I don't see a laptop at all. But again, that's neither here nor there, because at the end of the day, check a TV sometime later after this. And, Ed, I'm going to give you kudos, and we're going to come back on now on the screen. Ed, you said when we watched this for the very first time, we had Doug Bishop, the actual diver who was up with the ZZ Top beard, our good friend Doug Bishop. When we had him on the show and we looked at this video, the first thing you and Doug said that, when that car was upside down inside that body of water, that you would have A, dragged it out on its roof, and B, you would have wrapped. And now, Ed, so many questions are coming into DutyRon.com. How would you have netted those windows all the way around the car like you're wrapping something with saran wrap?
Well, first of all, before any of that occurred, your GPS located its position. Okay, you draw it underwater. You actually draw underwater. There's ways to write underwater to do this documenting. Your full forensic photography underwater. As I said earlier in other episodes, there are forensic standards for underwater crime scenes, and none of them were followed. I didn't see one camera out of any of those divers. I didn't see anybody go down there and photograph how they found the vehicle and the body inside. I didn't see anything. I saw Adventures with Purpose and their video, but I didn't see law enforcement do any of that. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that it wasn't done, but it didn't appear to be done from when I see the divers go in and I see the divers come out. I don't see any photographic equipment with them. I didn't see anything to do sketches. I didn't see any of the forensic standards that I know of from training and literature on underwater crime scene investigations. I didn't see any of that being conducted here. Okay. Now, once everything gets documented, okay, now you wrap the window. Now, I want to wrap as least amount of the vehicle as possible, because even though the vehicle is submerged in water, you can bring the vehiel out, dry it out, and still get fingerprints and still get DNA.
How do you wrap the windows, Ed?
Well, in this case, you use some plastic and some magnets, and you attach it to the frame around the windows. I have magnets that once it could give you strengths in the hundreds of pounds that it would take to pull it off once you attached it to metal. Right. So you would cover these windows Now you can do it the way AW Inventions with Purpose have done it. They have these nettings that go around the whole vehicle. Okay,
So
you could do it that way.
Wrapping up a sandwich, you know.
Right, but I would try to limit it as much as possible because I want to keep as many surfaces friction free from the wrap. And because when that's rubbing against surfaces, it could tend to obliterate a fingerprint that's just resting on that exterior metallic surfaces or the glass surfaces. And I get pissed off when I hear so-called experts saying you can't get a fingerprint from a surface that was underwater, and that's just bullshit. Okay, yeah, I've done it. You can do it, and I've tested it, and you can do it. So stop the nonsense, all right? And so we lost all that evidence, and then it doesn't help to have people without gloves touching steering wheels and touching the side of the vehicles as it's being pulled out of the lake. And it doesn't help that they flipped the car over underwater. They should have just left it on its roof and pulled it out the way it was.
Well, let me ask you, the Check It TV, you saw the video before he took it down, Ed. I don't think Lieutenant Lane had the opportunity to see it. Retired Lieutenant Lane, again, commanding officer of the NYPD. He's retired from the computer crime squad. Check It TV handling that thing, giving it to the grandpa, then handing it over to law enforcement. What's the chances of still getting, fingerprints off of that laptop, whether it's Kiely's fingerprints, whoever she was with that night, whoever handled that thing?
Well, from what I saw, they only touched the exterior of the laptop, but then there was a portion where he did open the laptop and touch the interior, and you could see water draining out of the laptop as he was holding it. Okay, he didn't know any better. Okay, he's a civilian. He doesn't have the training. He doesn't understand the forensic aspect. Now, the emotion of the grandfather, he didn't touch it. He touched it gingerly on the edges, but the damage had already been done. But that's not to say you don't try to find the fingerprints or any DNA after these individuals touched it. You may get a mixture. You may have a mixture of DNA. You may have overlapping fingerprints from whoever touched it first, and then these people touching it after they retrieved it out of the water.
Right.
And even the deputy sheriff that was there, and how he handled it.
Yeah.
Okay.
He didn't seem experienced, and I don't like to ever, knock law enforcement, but I'm basing on what I saw. And when the grandfather turned to him and said, "Can I hold it?" He was just like, "Yeah, go ahead."
He wasn't. Well, I mean, the whole thing about from the way they responded to the 911 call is they weren't treating it as evidence.
Yeah.
They told the guy, "We're not coming out for this."
Very unfortunate. Very unfortunate. So clearly, we could see here. This is the visor. I mean, now from this angle, I can definitely see it. There's the little connector, and this is everything that's just down and on top on the floor on the roof.
And that's Ron. That truly, that's a hard seltzer. That's an alcoholic beverage.
Yeah, I could see it now, but when I looked at it, it looked like a flat thing. I could see it now.
It's a can.
Yep. I was looking the other angle we were looking at. It looked like a flat, like candy bar, but what do I know? I'm just
one of our people in the chat said, "Follow the grain in your own wood."
Okay.
Said she sent you a photo of something she believes to be the laptop, and she marked it with an arrow. So if you can see that,
I'll try to pull it up. I want to go to some of the questions because we're almost at that 1 minute, 1 hour mark, and I promised Lieutenant that we'd wrap it up.
Hey, he's a lieutenant. He gets overtime and he can take it in cash. Okay.
I wish.
It's the best rank on the job.
Absolutely, 100%. I said that, boss. I said it numerous times. The best, even though I'm first grade detective, I said, but the best supervisory rank on the job was always the lieutenant.
Cash overtime. This message comes in from DutyRon.com, and it's from Greg. Greg M sends in a message, and he says, would Kiely's fingerprints still be found on an item recovered out of water? And do these fingerprints start to fade after some time? I think we just answered that. But the computer-related question, that was his second part of it. He says, what is the verification process to know whether the laptop is actually Kiely's laptop?
Well, obviously, like I say, those stickers are important. Many times, young people will photograph themselves and place it online. Many times they'll capture the lid of the laptop in an image. Obviously, the serial number. If you buy a Mac, an Apple product, the serial number is very hard to see. It's very tiny. You need a magnifying glass, but usually that's recorded by the Apple Store or wherever you bought it, and for warranty purposes and so forth. So that can be tied to her. The physical device. Those are the primary ways you'd link it to her.
Yeah.
And let me, since the boss brought up the stickers, let me talk about those stickers forensically. The adhesive side of those stickers are awesome collectors of fingerprints and DNA. Okay, and then once they adhere to the surface of the laptop in this case, and if there's pressure put on them, it kind of seals it, and it's kind of in a protective state. So there's ways we can remove those adhesive labels from the back, from the laptop, and then look at it in the lab to obtain DNA, fingerprints, and also it's great for collecting hairs and fibers too. Yeah. So, there could be a lot of forensic evidence on the adhesive side of those stickers, and then that could come back to her. It's her DNA, it's her fingerprints that are back there.
Think about how many times you do go to put a sticker on and you touch that sticky side, and then you're like, ah, shit.
Or just regular tape, whether it's a Scotch tape or duct tape. You touch that, and it's a great surface to leave a fingerprint. I can't tell you how many home invasion robberies where they use duct tape on people that once we take it off, we bring it to the lab. Yeah. There's several things there. We have to tear, so we can do a jigsaw match back to the roll that it possibly came from. But on the adhesive side, there's fingerprints, there's DNA, there's hairs and fibers.
Right. How important, Ed, is the positioning of the seats in the vehicle? A lot of people are stuck on that and asking questions. I want to get that out of the way. As a crime scene investigator, that comes down to photographing, sketching,
and measuring, sketching, and whether or not the vehicle had, electronic seat controls where you can program the seats for different drivers.
Right.
Okay. Right. That would all have to be looked at.
Yeah. This one goes to the LT. I think we answered it, but I'm going to ask him again. If her phone is linked to the laptop, is it possible to get the phone data off the laptop, or will the water have destroyed everything? Thank you, Isabel, for sending that in.
Well, when you say linked, if it's linked through the cloud, then obviously it's not affected by the environment that the physical device was in. That's basically, if you have a Mac, you can actually, your text messages can be linked also. So they can be copied. Your images, if you sync that, can be synced to the cloud and to your Mac from your phone. I do that. So I can actually see all the images on my phone in a different environment.
And those Apple servers have that information.
Yes, and that can be gotten with legal process, either a subpoena or a search warrant. So, that didn't exist when I first started. And that's a huge clue that can help out law enforcement in a case like this.
All right, I'm scanning some of the messages on DutyRon.com. There's a lot of redundant ones. Let me go to the chat now here. I got to give some of the people a chance in the chat. If you want to highlight the chat, if you want to put it in bold lettering, now's the time. If you want to get a question, I know the chat's going to go crazy now. I'm like, ugh. But I want to just get one or two from the live chatters because there's been a lot of good information being shared back and forth here. But again, we have a situation here where you have so many what ifs and so many possibilities, and this is not even deemed a criminal investigation at this point. Right now, again, we have to realize that law enforcement is accident investigation squad from California Highway Patrol, right? They're going to do their thing where they recreate this whole thing. That takes time. You're going to have the tox report coming back. That's going to be very important. Cause and manner of death. These are all things that we're talking. The sheriff, she said November 1st. And I think she used that date because she wanted to give it time for everyone to calm down a little bit. But it's having the reverse effect. Everyone's getting hopped up because we want answers and we want them now. So that's the problem. All right. So here I see something good. What about the lack of photos? Boss, I talked to you about this. This is coming in from Aussie J from over in Australia. Put another prawn on the Barbie. What about the lack of photos on social media at DutyRon? And I'm throwing it at you, Lieutenant Lane.
Sure. I mean, it's not unusual. You know, in this case, I believe there were many, many people at this party that we discussed. You know, think about it. If you're a young person, you're going to college or high school, and you're thinking about your future, you know, do you want to be involved in this? Oh, you know, even though you may not have evidence, or you may not be a suspect, you don't want to be drawn into it. Oh, I'll have to testify, I'll have to speak to the police, and maybe it'll be someone I know who gets arrested. So, you know, some people, and I don't support this, is the wrong decision, will delete their social media profiles or delete data from it or set it to private so it can't be seen. And that happens. And as I understand, in this case, there is very little to no imagery or videos or anything from the party. And that's unfortunate, but it isn't a dead end. If this is deemed a criminal investigation and the proper legal process is followed, a lot of that data, even though the person may delete their profile, it still exists on the social media company's server. As I mentioned before, that for business purposes, they don't do this for law enforcement. And all these companies have fleets of lawyers who respond to the hundreds and thousands of subpoenas that come in every day. But they are required to keep business records, as any business is. So they keep them within the constraints of the time period they deem is in compliance with the law. And then that can be gotten. You know, we've gotten cases where someone will delete their emails from their device, but they're still on the server for a limited amount of time. So those things can be reconstructed. It's painstaking. It's you know, you have to try to figure out what is the account. You know, if there's nothing online, how do you send a search warrant or a subpoena? So that's where the old-fashioned detective works comes in, where you want to interview people at the party. Hey, who was there? You know, and interview the same person different times. You build a case on how many people were there, of their names, then you go after their accounts after that online.
You know, there's a question here that, you know, the lieutenant answered earlier, folks. You know, how do you dry out these servers or these hard drives and so forth? That's a trade secret, and we don't want to give out that information, okay? Because then the bad guys could use that against what we are going to do to try to retrieve the information. So we're going to hold that.
Sure, and all the things I'm saying are public knowledge. Right. You know, I would never, you know, divulge the secret aspects of law enforcement. And you know, remember when I was in narcotics, you know, we would clear the courtroom before the undercover would testify in court. Right. You sort of protect his identity.
There's so much that we keep close to the vest for very good reason, ladies and gentlemen. And we say this, and a lot of you guys get sick of hearing it, but you know, there's things that we do not want to divulge out there to give the bad guys an upper hand. And there's so much that goes on behind the scenes, and you know, people refer to it as secret squirrel stuff. You know, it's all a big secret. It's all a big mystery. It's a big mystery and a secret for your advantage, so we can catch these people and bring them. It's not only about catching them; it's bringing them through the process and getting that guilty verdict.
Now, there was a question earlier about DNA from glass. Yes, it's a possibility to get DNA from the glass of the vehicle, including broken glass if you can find it. Yes.
Right. Hey, comes in on DutyRon.com, and then we'll wrap it up. Is there, in this is from, again, from Isabel. She says, is there a special law enforcement communication email or open line with social media when it comes to these investigations? Does law enforcement, is what she's asking, have access to where they can, you know, communicate with these various outlets like Facebook and Twitter and all of this stuff?
Well, all these companies have to, you know, reply to our subpoenas. When I was doing this, many times we'd use what we call administrative subpoena. We'd have an official of the police department, usually in the legal bureau, would sign. We'd draft the subpoena because we'd done it so many times. We know what to do, and we'd say, hey, whatever. Say it was AOL back then, AOL, and we knew their corporate address and where to send it to. I'm sure everything now is electronic, but we would draft the subpoena. In the case of so and so, we need to preserve this evidence, or we need these IP connection logs, and we put all the technical information into the subpoena. So then when it goes to the internet service provider or the website provider, they now have to undertake a diligent search to find those records. And if they can't find them, they have to state so in writing. And then they hand it over to us, and that's all part of the process to go to court and testify. So we need all that. So there are special phone numbers, and I'm sure now special email addresses that are only available to law enforcement because of the sheer number of requests that come in.
Yeah.
So they have to field those, and like I said, this data doesn't stay around forever on the server, so we need to get it to them right away, and they need to respond right away. I mean, we've had cases where back in the early days, we had Apple devices that were locked, and I know there's been controversy since then where Apple will not unlock them, but back then they did. We'd put a detective on a plane with an iPhone, so it never left his custody, and he'd fly all the way to to Cupertino in California to Apple, and he would walk into the room with the engineers, and they would unlock it. So he could testify in court that he watched everything, and then they would unlock the data from the phone, and we copy it out, and we testify in court.
And there's that chain of custody, and everything is a smooth, tightened up investigation.
Yeah, and unfortunately, they changed their ways now. In the big case that really bugs the hell out of me was the San Bernardino terrorist attack, and they wouldn't open that phone.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, that's a problem. And I'll tell you, real quick, war story. I'm not going to say the name of the company because maybe they've changed their ways, but when we were doing these undercover investigations where we pretend to be, young people online, and predators would come after us, we'd obviously have assumed names and fictitious accounts, right? So, and once again, I won't go into the details, but there are ways that we could disguise ourselves online so that even if someone knew what they were doing, they couldn't find out who we really were. Mm-hmm. So I had a case. I was out in California at one of these federal meetings, and we had a representative of the company come in, a legal person, and say, "Oh, we're very responsive to law enforcement. We acknowledge the difficult work you do." And then one of the persons in the audience said, "Hey, I had a case where I had a hands-on offender who was abusing children, and we had them in a chat room, and we were gathering evidence, and the website provider knew it was undercover law enforcement account and deleted the account because their response was, we believe our product should be for the free and open exchange of real people." And we just kind of looked at them like, "You've got to be kidding me." Basically pulled the rug out from an investigation where someone was physically abusing a child. That's not what we wanted to hear, and that's not the kind of cooperation we expect.
That is up. I mean, I can't even believe that, but I mean, obviously, this is what's going on. Before it disappears, Jennifer Nobles is a channel member, a great friend, Patreon supporter. She does it all. She was there with us with our missing boys from Bakersfield, California, Sincere and Classic. That case is going to trial next month, and we'll be covering that extensively. The children's adoptive parents murdered them. They are charged with first-degree murder. That case is going to trial starting in October. And like I said, Prime Time with DutyRon, we actually covered that case so extensively. We have over 100 videos on Orrin and Orson West, Sincere and Classic. So Jennifer says, and we spoke about it, but I got to put it up there. Thank you for the $10 super chat. That buys us all coffee in the morning. I'm assuming that her cloud is being fully investigated and kept undercover due to the nature of the investigation at this point. I'm curious about the cloud info. Is it private for this reason?
Well, basically anything you post online, and I'm not an attorney, but anything you post online that is for public consumption is fair game to be captured by law enforcement without any paperwork. We could just go in and take screenshots or whatever, like anyone else could. But your private data, your private communications, and this was established many, many years ago. Say we had a case where someone was emailing someone and they wanted to abuse a child, and unfortunately it was the child's mother who was facilitating this crime. We needed to get those emails. Well, to get those from the server, we need a search warrant signed by a judge. In this case, it was a federal judge. we would call it, I won't get into the details, but basically to get any kind of text messages or something that emails or private correspondence and cloud data goes into that is not available to the public, that you're not putting out in the public, that requires a search warrant.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you for clearing that up. And it's always an educational experience here on Crime Time with DutyRon. HR, this is the last question, and I promise we're wrapping it up. If someone had her phone, could they alter text messages?
I mean, there's no limit to what anyone can do if they know what they're doing. The actual text message itself, they could delete it. Once it's sent and it's on the phone, it's difficult to go back and change it. It's also synced to a server, so a copy is there. And then you also got to remember the text messages are two-way communication, so it's on the sender and the receiver's side, so there's a copy on that end. I don't know of a way that you could specifically go in and take a specific text message that already exists and edit it on a device. If you had the right type of software, you could copy it out from the phone, edit it, and probably put it back on, but you still couldn't get around the cloud aspect and the other person having it.
Yeah. Like you said, boss, there's so many advanced hackers and things of that nature out there. Anything's probably possible, but in a situation like this, we got a bunch of kids that were out partying, something bad happened, and now we have a 16-year-old who is deceased. Again, it's not a criminal investigation as we know at this point, but they have to clear everybody. And there was the questions and the thoughts about her boyfriend or ex-boyfriend, or they were on again, off again. This kid's name is Jagger. They cleared him and they said, he was not a person of interest. And I hate that term, person of interest, but they use it. We used to just call them suspects, right? But so everyone's attacking him online now and sending him death threats and saying, you're responsible for Kiely's death and things of that nature, like crazy stuff. We have to keep in mind, listen, you're judged on, you're based, your messages sent on social media. Those are permanent markings. So you have to be careful about what you say and what you do, and you got to keep your opinions to yourself. If you feel that somebody's responsible for something, it's the job of law enforcement to figure that out. And they go through these steps and they check off the people who are now not, in there, on the radar anymore. And that's how they do it. It's a process of elimination. I think we can all agree to that. And it's not a good look to go and start telling people, sending death threats and stuff like that. Rebecca, thank you for the $10 super chat. Thank you for all what you do. Keep up the great work. Prayers for everybody. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, Ed, let's wrap it up. You're in Jersey working. You're doing a special assignment. We got the boss for 18 minutes of overtime. That's $168.50 an hour.
The good old days.
Yeah. I'll write him a piece of paper. I owe you. All right.
We got to give him a SA or lieutenant commander a status, and so up his pay to captain.
But then he can't take anything in cash, so that's not.
No, that's not true. That's not. He's still a lieutenant.
Oh, that's right. SA.
Yes,
right,
it's still exactly. It's just the captains that can't take it in cash.
Listen, Dennis, this has been an enlightening an hour and 18 minutes. We appreciate you. Will you please promise us, if we have some other stuff that develops in this and any of our other cases, would you be willing to come back and join us again?
Of course. I'm happy to help.
Excellent.
Dennis, great stuff. Thank you for your time with us.
Yeah. Let's add them.
And I got to say to everyone, please support your law enforcement. It was difficult, like Ron said, when I started at the same time, 2,200 homicides in New York City. Before COVID, we were down to below 300. I still work in Times Square, and I see young cops, and I'll walk up to them and say, I stood this foot post that you stand today 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was difficult then. It's difficult now. Your law enforcement are the only ones to stand between you and the wolf at the door. So we need to support them. There's a lot of bad press now about bad cops. In any profession, you'll have a very small minority of people who make it hard for everyone. The overall majority of law enforcement officers I ever worked with, federal, state, city, were hardworking and no one's getting rich doing this. They did it because they wanted to help people. So they deserve our support.
Could you
Amen.
please tell the audience what we talked about? You're the founder of the New York City Internet Crimes Against Children's Task Force. You want to talk just a little bit about that?
Sure. So it's and it's interesting how it started. It was started by John Walsh, if you remember, from America's Most Wanted. His son tragically was killed in Florida, and he wanted to do something to help other families in the situation. And he wanted to form a group that would help out law enforcement in missing children cases. And President Reagan had great foresight when Mr. Walsh came to him and said, I want to create like a federal task force. He said, if we keep it private, then you can take donations. So say they had a case of a child missing in the Everglades, the federal government, you have to go through all kinds of red tape to get someone to use one of these airboats with a giant propeller to go through there. When it's a private or semi-private organization, they can go and solicit that. Hey, can you donate the use of that? So it was brilliant that was done, and that's how it started. And the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children is headquarters, or what, in Alexandria, Virginia. And I would go down and visit those folks several times a year. And they do some really painful work. They have a group called the Child Victim Identification Project. And what they do is they look at images of sexual abuse images of children and try to identify them through looking at the background of the image. Like we had cases that were broken because there was a Cub Scout uniform hanging in the background of an image of a child being offended, and they were able to zero in on it and see what troop it was. There's been cases where in a hotel room, they were able to match a carpet to an offender. So these people have to look at these images every day. And we had a case where a child that had been victimized for years and the images were all over the internet. They eventually figured out who the offender was. He was brought to justice and put to prison. That victim, who is now a young adult, came to the CVIP unit and thanked those investigators. And you can't imagine what it's like to have to see these images. I saw them for 8 years every day. You get a thing called vicarious trauma, where you start to feel the trauma that the child did, and it's heartbreaking. And some of my detectives couldn't do it anymore. They said, look, I have a young child, I just can't do this. The FBI agents who work on this are required to undergo counseling. We didn't do it in the NYPD, but these people are the unsung heroes. They, solved a lot of cases, and the detectives in the different computer crimes units do the same things. They see these images every day. They cannot be unseen. I'll see it in my nightmares forever. But that's what has to be done to crack these cases and bring these people to justice. So, you see the cop on the street, detective, that's one small part of law enforcement. There's a lot of people who do some really painful work. And as Ed can tell you, in crime scene, you see some horrific things. You go to scenes and the smells and the images, it sticks with you. And it
can't be unseen.
No.
And that's why our health services and our job has to change, because we can't ignore the mental health of our officers.
Yeah,
we can't. I mean, simply watching these images can give you PTSD.
Oh,
right.
It's horrible. It's horrible. And so those people need our support, and we should support them and the good work that they do. And when they do find children and reunite them with their family, it's a great moment, and it has to be celebrated.
Yeah.
Thank you, boss. Thank you. That was great.
Thank you. I will link the website to the I'll get the website from you, and I'll link it down below in my description, and I'll also put it on DutyRon.com. Again, support your local law enforcement. Men and women are out there doing God's work. They're out there protecting us, and without our law enforcement, we'll have anarchy, and we don't want that. We got to be able to support these great people that are out there. It's a job that we don't take it to become rich. That is for sure.
What are you talking talking about?
Come on. Well, maybe some do better than others, but it's okay. We're not in it to. We're not in it for the money. We're in it to help people, and that's sounds kind of cliche, but at the end of the day, that's what it is. You take a job in first responders, EMS, fire department, police. We do it to help people, and that's the bottom line. So as I like to end all these, God bless the world, God bless the United States of America, and God bless each and every one of us here in the chat, but especially all victims of crime and their families across the globe. They need us now more than ever. Let's send them strength, prayers, and positive vibes. I want to thank our esteemed guest, Dennis Lane, retired lieutenant from the NYPD Computer Crime Squad, and as always, my co-host, Ed Wallace. Ed, I know you got something to say.
You know it, folks. Always stay safe, stay prepared, and watch your six.
Thank you guys for joining. Good night. Thank you, Dennis. We'll speak soon.
Thank you.
Peace.
Take care.